Good morning. So, sorry if I look weird. The light's kind of harsh. It's like, I don't know, it's like 8, almost 9 in the morning. And I just woke up. Honestly, I woke up still um, ruminating on the video that I made yesterday. And not the video, but the subject of the video. And, I like, it comes and goes, but like just the first thing in the morning, I woke up and I was just like, and another thing about that stupid freaking Satan's Guide to the Bible situation. And it like just randomly I'll just be like, and who even does that? Like who does that? And why would you even so like I'm constantly thinking about it, but like um God actually reminded me of something. That's not even what I wanted to talk about. I'm here to do my Jubilees video that I'm excited about. Shouldn't be as long because I found exactly 10 things. So and I got it all marked out, and it should be a lot easier. But you don't need all the backstory on Jubilees and all that. But one thing I will say about yesterday's video that God reminded me of was like just the context of reading the Old Testament. And there's a reason why it's not widely read, which I touched on a little bit in the video. But it's more than just being bored, and that's a big part of it because it's a very large heaping mound of books to study, and it's old. It's very old, and it's really hard to sort of navigate and get in the mind of the people who are telling you the stories because it is so old. And so you're so removed from it. It's not, and this was like, this, I mean, I don't know if this has changed, but this was like the common understanding that when you're reading the Old Testament, you're not reading something that you can immediately relate to. You have to dig to get the lessons in it because you have to even know, there's certain things that still are around, like marriage, and but even that is like the context is completely different. You got a culture where women having children is incredibly highly prized. These things that you have to imagine and you have to look up and research because the Bible itself is not going to give you clues. Like now, back in the day, this is what it was like. It's just telling you. So it's a really, really old thing. And if you don't have the natural, the curiosity, the if you're not bent towards any of the humanities, the history, philosophy, anything, context, whore like me, if you're not naturally, good at research, geography, all of these things, it's going to be even more dense to get through. And that's why you got a lot of people relying on their pastors to tell them what the book is even about. But even that is sort of this, it creates a shallow connection. It's just like when you're sitting in school and they're telling you, you're having to take notes about the Enlightenment period, and you're just going to have to remember what they told you about it, and you're not really connected to it. So, so when you're reading stories like about Moses or whatever, there's going to be a lot of things in there that not only do you not have the context for, and you have to sort of learn how to, if you're going to do it on your own, and there's great commentaries out there. And honestly, if you're studying theology or what theologians and biblical historians should be doing, and this is the only thing they should have time to do, is enlightening us on what was going on during this period, because we have a hard time understanding that you can't go to the grocery store and get food. So this is, you know, it's agrarian. It's not Western by any means. The West doesn't even exist yet. Okay. Greek does not exist yet. When we're talking about the Old Testament, what was life like? No electricity, no TV, no newspaper, no printing press, nothing that could be considered modern. What is the geography like in the Middle East? You might have to just literally go to the Middle East just to get some enlightenment on some of this stuff that's personal to you, right? So nobody reads it going, oh, this is how I should live my life. You can't. It's too foreign. What you're trying to do when you're reading Old Testament stories is like, okay, what even is this? What am I supposed to be getting out of it? What is God showing me? Why is this? What is the context of this? Why is this important? And so it's largely closed off to you. Nobody is reading, the story about them going into the promised land. Nobody's even going, ew, that's barbaric. Like, how can you can't judge. What happened to not judging other cultures? Like, you understand that you can't, you don't even have the right tools to judge it. So, which makes it kind of even more of a difficult read, because it's like, but it also creates this thing of like unbiased. You can't be biased against something that is just completely foreign to you and that you don't even know like what it means. So you really have to like do work to get into this Old Testament. But here's the thing though too, because if you've been, I've seen this with my eyes, where you'll be, like there'll be some kid, some 18-year-old dude from the ghetto, and he'll be reading it and reading, about Pharaoh, and he's like, oh, okay, so Pharaoh was like Sugar Daddy or whatever. And you go and you kind of stop, because you understand like, okay, this thing is coming alive for him. Like, you're 17 years old, you're 18 years old, the public school system has failed you, but you're reading this and you're like understanding the story and you're like in the story. Like, that doesn't just happen. So like, again, like most things that are the things of God, that are just taken for granted, and people don't recognize them right away, or if ever, because there's nothing shiny happens. No, there's no music, there's no whatever. But you've had that moment where you see somebody and they're like, oh, or somebody will be reading like some story about David or whatever, and they'll be like, oh, so David was scared, and you're like, why are you saying that? And they're like, oh, well, because he did this, and then like he did that first because he didn't want such and such, and then then he turned and told his wife this, like he was scared, and it's like an insight that's not on the page. They could swear that it was on the page and it's very obvious to them. It's like God gives people the insights based on who they are and their life and what they understand. They have the same, they recognize David, the same things in them, and they just see it. But you don't see it because you're not that person and you don't have that insight. So you're like, and then when they say it, you're like, oh my gosh, that he was scared. That's why he did X, Y, and Z after that. And it opens the thing up for you. It's like, this thing is spiritual, and it's not doing what you think it ought to do. It's not, you think it's just going to be this rundown of what humans ought to do. Give us the thing so we know how to conduct ourselves. And it's like, God wants to do so much more, and he's you just have to understand his way. And like, you can't, it's not just a historical document, and it's not just um no one is reading the Bible judging it, and no one is reading the Bible thinking, okay, this is how. No one's reading the story about Joshua going into the promised land and going around the wall 7 times, looking for a way to justify whatever war that the U.S. is currently waging, which, by the way, is also strange because we're sending a bunch of money to Ukraine and you're not batting an eyelash. What's going on? What are they doing? What did Ukraine do? I'm sure they've got some story ready for you, because clearly all you need is a story. Then you're like, oh, okay, that checks out, I guess. And then they can do all the killing they want. But yeah, no, they didn't leave you the backstory in the Bible about why Canaan deserves to get the business. But if you can't hear a story about ancient Mesopotamia without being triggered, then just put the book down. Just put the book down and go do something else, because you can't. And the devil can only do that with people who, the book is closed to them for whatever reason. That's why those scholars, just stop. If you don't love this word, if you don't respect this word, and you see, as even in that video where they tried to argue that the Bible is used in archaeological things, and then it's like, well, no, it isn't. Yes, it is. No, it is. Yes, it is. I can totally see how one person can get the value out of the book and find what they are sure to find, and how another group of people can say there's nothing here. Like the fact that dude was like, oh, well, there's no Egyptian, we can't find any traces of Egyptian culture. When we look at the ancient Hebrew, ancient Israelite, whatever's, we don't see any Egyptian influence. And it's like, okay, are we even reading the same book? Are we even reading the same book? That's one of the most stupidest things I've ever heard in my life. When you've got a book that makes a whole, not even makes a point, the whole theme is to take the Israelites out of Egypt. Then he had them be in the wilderness for 40 years. The whole generation that was in Egypt died out in the wilderness. Even if you don't want to say you don't believe the story, okay, follow the story though. Then he literally says, listen, this is how you're going to build my ark. This is how you're going to build this. This is how you're going to make the pots. This is how you're going to do this. This is what you're not going to do anymore. This is how you're not going to make your clothes anymore. That's a major part of the book. How can you sit there and listen to somebody say that? Do you not see the flim-flam that the devil is doing on people? That's not even... You don't even have to be smart to dispute that. It's why would there be traces of Egyptian culture on ancient? So the Israelites did exist. And you didn't find any Egyptian traces. Which is another, just an assumption. That would be like saying, well, we did the murder, we studied the murder scene, but we think it was just accidental because we didn't find any it was accidental, but we think it was probably a murder because we didn't find any banana peels for anyone to slip on. It's what? So it was a murder? That's literally the equivalent. And I don't even get me started. I just think about how I'm going to do this really quick. Okay. So they went this whole thing about dashing the children's head against the rocks. Okay. This is what I'm saying, why you can't just do this. So So they went to Psalm 137, right? And they picked out they picked out the part where he says, it's Psalm 137, verse 9. And he says, happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. First, he starts out with Psalm 137. Then he's like, by the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept. And well, actually, it just said by the rivers of Babylon. And then he like referenced all like two songs that I've never heard of in my life to try and make it seem like we sing songs about this scripture all the time. And we don't. Like two like reggae songs that said by the rivers of Babylon. Then he skipped all the way down to verse 9 and said, happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Like, and I can't tell you, like, the 2 or 3 times that it did mention the Bible or mention, like, actually going to the scriptures and not just queuing up some video of somebody talking about the scriptures. Literally, it was like a flash of Bible. Like, it wasn't like, let's go through it together. It's like the devil was like, see, let me just show you. It's like right here. And he just shut the book. He's like, yeah. Like, he was like not there for a long time. He's like, Psalm 137. Like, insane. So let's go through Psalm 137, okay? Which is like one of the shortest Psalms I've ever seen. It's literally only 9 verses long. Like, if you know anything about Psalms, that's incredibly short. Okay. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. There on the poplars we hung our harps, for there our captors asked us for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, sing us one of the songs of Zion. How can we sing the songs of the Lord while in a foreign land? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. May my tongue cling to the roof of my mouth. If I do not remember you, if I do not consider Jerusalem my highest joy. Remember, Lord, what the Edomites did on the day Jerusalem fell. Tear it down, they cried. Tear it down to its foundations. Daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction. Happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. That's the whole thing. Okay. Let me start backwards. Okay. Now, we don't know what David is talking about, what event he's talking about. But let's say he's talking about the Holocaust. Let's say he's talking about the distant future. And, Babylon is the Nazis. Okay. I'm just plug in something so you can do this. Okay. So, daughter Babylon, doomed to destruction. Happy is the one who repays you according to what you have done to us. Happy is the one who seizes your infants and dashes them against the rocks. Okay, so that is just someone talking who wants to wish death on the perpetrators' families. Is it over the top? I don't know. I've never been in the situation where my captors are asking me to sing a song from my homeland that they are burning down currently and laughing about it. So I'm not going to judge that situation. If you want to judge that situation, like, whatever. He's wishing death on the people that are doing this to him. And you know what I thought about? I thought about, like, if you go to the Holocaust Museum, like, they'll have a whole thing of, like, people telling stories. And a lot of them become atheists. And they talk about, like, how they turned their back on God after that day. And a lot of people feel more comfortable with that. They would rather people talk about leaving God and abandoning God than wishing death on infants, which is backwards. I hate to tell you, but it is. So now let's go before that to my initial point that I want to make first. Okay. So David, so far, is the undisputed author of Psalms. The future remains to be seen. Okay. David was the king of Israel. He was the second king of Israel. Before that, there was an unbroken history of judges before there was a king in Israel. because the idea was that God was the king of Israel and he was going to rule them. But after a while, they strayed from God's commands. Somebody would come in and, probably Philistines, probably Canaan, whatever remained, and come in and try to conquer them again. And then God would appoint a judge. That's where Samson comes from. That's where Deborah comes from. That's where Gideon, these people were judges, okay? And, they would rule for 40 years and then they would die. And then, Israel would fall off again. And then there'd be another judge. Okay, so there was an unbroken chain of that. Then they had kings. David's king number 2 of all the kings, and there was a lot of them before they went into exile. So what in the ham sandwich is he talking about? What is he talking about? By the rivers of Babylon, we sat and wept when we remembered Zion. What happened to Zion? If I forget you, Jerusalem, may my right hand forget its skill. This idea that Zion is gone, that Jerusalem is gone, has fallen. And what is he talking about? He's king. His temple's in Jerusalem till he died. So, what is that? It must be a prophecy. When? What about David? Was David 200 years after this? What is he even talking about? So this idea to take one book, one prophetic book, there are prophecies in the Psalms, and that's like a known thing. Do you see the flim flam, that stupid video? I'm thinking about it, I'm like, okay, it's not that strong. It's actually not that strong. It's just that initial presentation can really, if you're not strong at all, that initial presentation is going to get you and have you just sailing down a whole river. So Psalm 137 isn't even couldn't possibly be about what anybody would think it's about, because it's not. It's about something that hasn't even happened. So what even is the context? What's going on? You really can't just cherry pick stuff like that. This is a massive book and it's very old. You cannot cherry pick. So, so I don't know, just stuff like that I've been thinking about. And I'm just like, and something else and one other thing. So it's just been kind of driving me crazy. I'm 23 minutes in, and I do not want to make this video just about that. So I'm going to go ahead and get into my Jubilees. Now, I might get halfway in or something. I was going to try and make a top 10 again, but I literally had exactly 10 things. So there's really no point in me ordering them. And it's kind of hard because they're all pretty equal in terms of interesting tidbit information. And then there's just a couple of doozies. So the first thing, which seems to be pertinent, because we keep talking about the same group of people. So apparently, and this is also probably why people say that Jubilees is not, doesn't line up with the scripture, because there is a passage where Isaac, let me make sure it's Isaac. Yeah. Isaac puts a curse on the Philistines. Very lengthy, spent a lot of time, because the curse is long. So, but here's the thing though. It's not that this isn't in the Bible. The curse part is not. But after going back and forth in the story, what it looks like is that it just kind of glosses over it. The way that it jumps through the actual thing and doesn't mention it at all. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen. It's not necessarily that it didn't happen, but Genesis doesn't mention it. Why doesn't it mention it? I don't know. Why doesn't it mention that Canaan was cursed for going into the land of Shem? I don't know. But it definitely adds context because it shows you how long that, even before the Israelites were a thing, they was having trouble with Philistines. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and them was having trouble with Philistines. And um, the other thing that becomes really obvious, or really that you really see, is just how everyone on earth was related, and they understood how they were related to each other. The where they lived, because they named where they lived after their names of their son or whoever. And so you knew who was who your cousins were. And it was very like open in your face. And people knew who God was, and they just were like, no thanks. Like this idea that, oh, well, God just needs to make himself known. It's like, no, he did that. And they went down a rabbit hole till he had to destroy everybody. Like, so let me see if I can find the story in the Bible. And it's very like, what makes me think that it has validity is because without that aspect of it, without that part of it, like there's really no point in mentioning that it happened. Like it's really strange that it's in there because it's this detailed thing about wells, and it's just like, why is this even in here? So, so here's what Jubilee says. It says, now all the wells which the servants of Abraham had dug during the life of Abraham, the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham and filled them with earth, which sounds pretty petty to me. Now, again, this is one of those Old Testament moments where it's like, wells were the only source of water that these people had in the land. It was a dry land. So if it didn't rain, which it probably wasn't gonna, like, you couldn't get water. So people had wells, they had cisterns, they had to hold their water. And if there was a drought, forget it. You had to find someplace else to go because you weren't getting water. Okay, should I take this? I think I should. All right, I'm going to end this right now because it's already almost 30 minutes and I'll start another video.